Just a couple seconds here. Okay, here we go. All right. Hi, everybody. This is Dr. Sonia McGowan with the Covenant Pediatric Wellness Center. And for our last Facebook Live of the year, I'm so excited. This is like a little cherry on top. My friend Terri Hirning from Flagstaff, Arizona, is here to we're just going to have a conversation like two old friends. And I think you guys are going to just love it. So, hi, Terri. Tell us about you and your family and all the things.
Hello, you are one of my favorite people. So this is just such a joy for me. And as you mentioned, I live in Flagstaff, Arizona, with my crazy bunch, which includes my son, Matthew, who is 22 and has largely lost his autism diagnosis. And we'll talk about what that means and what he's up to. My daughter, who is 19. And I actually have been blessed with a foreign exchange daughter this year from Brazil. And so she has joined our family, and she is 17, so in high school. So I just sort of, got pulled into this world, right? Like so many of us do. And our culmination, our life here that we've built has largely been based on our journey of autism treatment and recovery.
You can't forget your husband. Got to mention him.
No, I cannot. So I've been married for, we just celebrated in August our 23rd wedding anniversary. And, I pulled him sort of kicking and screaming into this realm too. And up until just recently, when they had a buyout, he worked for Biocidin. He's been my practice manager in the past. He's worked for Biocidin. So talking the talk, walking the walk, talking about how targeted nutraceuticals, targeted botanicals can be life-changing, because they were life-changing for our son. And as you know, I've just resigned my position of over 16 years at New Beginnings Nutritional. So he and I were both in the supplement world for a number of years. And so I honestly, God knew what he was doing when he brought Eric Hirning into my life, because I could not do what I have done either personally with our family or professionally. So I'm very thankful for him every single day.
So you and I sort of were connected through the Ion Cleanse technology, right? Didn't we meet at a conference where we were both doing something, speaking, or I don't know, but boy, we sure hit it off, didn't we?
That's sort of an understatement. Yeah, I think it might have been Autism One.
Yeah, I think it was.
Many years ago. And that was
Many
just the
years ago.
first of many conferences. You and I both were, on the conference circuit, for lack of a better term, for a number of years. So working conferences, going to conferences, speaking at conferences, those were the beautiful pieces, because even though we were at conferences, still getting to be with our community, oftentimes, whether it's as a parent or as a practitioner, there can be a feeling of isolation. I don't know if you share in that. And sometimes we feel like we're fighting the good fight, but we're doing it sort of on our own. And that's really not true. We have an amazing community, and being able to be together fills up our little buckets. And it's always too short and too crazy, and lots of long nights of not sleeping, because we want to hug our people and be with our other, parents of children who are going through this journey, who are looking for answers like you and I were so many years ago.
Mm-hmm. And what we really, I think, have in common that I thought would be a good conversation for today is we started out as moms of complex kids and we became practitioners. And so I know you and I are definitely on the same wavelength when it comes to believing with every fiber of our being that complex kids can recover. And, my kid recovered, your kid has recovered. So kind of start, if it's okay with Matthew that we talk about him, just what your early life was like and how you knew that things weren't moving along appropriately with him, and just everything that you've been through.
Yeah. And it's totally fine. He and I I love collaborating with my son. We at one point had a podcast together. He owns his own journey and understands his story, and that's a little piece I want to come back to, right? Because we have this now group of young adults who've moved into the world because of what we as moms, as dads, as with working with amazing physicians and practitioners, what we've been able to do, but it's still their journey, right? And they have their story that they are deserving of. And so he is at this point used to me talking about him. He's actually attended MAPS. You
Yep.
were in the audience singing happy birthday to him for his 20th birthday. So he was born via C-section. So, when you look back and you put together all the dots, right? Born via C-section to a mother who was probably very toxic, lived a very standard American lifestyle, and had no clue about this integrative, holistic world. Came into the world and was reactive to everything and anything, whether that was routine childhood procedures, whether that was Tylenol, whether that was formula. Everything was hard with Matthew. He didn't sleep, so I didn't sleep. He was screaming most of the day and night. I would wear him in a baby sling and vacuum, and that sensory surrounding him with that close proximity to my body and the sound, that white noise type sound, that was the only thing that would calm him. So we would get him leveled off, and then it would be another visit to the pediatrician, and we would start sort of from, back at square one. Okay. So he became horribly constipated. By 6 months, he was no longer making eye contact. He was looking at my hairline. Like I mentioned, the sensory issues, definitely sound sensitivities. And then as he progressed, he just didn't hit certain milestones. We didn't see a classic regression in, having a child who was speaking or walking or whatever, and then not. He just didn't develop. And so he had receptive language, but not expressive language. He mouthed things well past the age of appropriateness. He would fixate on certain things like spinning Tupperware lids. We knew he was in there. I knew he was in there. It was just getting that point of connection with him. And so there were so many red flags, and so many of those things were brushed off. And so this was, again, like I mentioned, 22 years ago. So it was a different climate. Medically, it was a different climate in terms of the dramatic rise of autism diagnoses, understanding what autism was. So by the time he was being assessed, we ended up having to move from my hometown, which was San Diego, because I had to quit my job. There was no way I could put him in daycare. I mean, literally, when I say he screamed all day and night, he screamed all day and night. And so I wasn't sleeping. He wasn't sleeping. There was no way I could go back to my job. So we moved to Arizona. And so by the time he was 2, almost 3, we were being introduced to early intervention due to lack of language, primarily, right? And then you start unraveling things. And he was the beginning getting diagnosed to meet the criteria for early intervention services, getting placed in the preschool here in Arizona, and just kind of going through those steps. So when he finally got a formal diagnosis of autism, he was 4, almost 5. So when I think about it now, it seems like, wow, that was so, that was relatively late, but that was just kind of the way things were done back then. And so it wasn't the diagnosis of level 1, level 2. It was just, autism criteria or not. And so that was when, I'd already started becoming disillusioned with the answers that I was given, because the answers weren't answers. Yeah. When I bring my child to a physician and I'm saying he's not sleeping, and, what can we do? And the answer is, well, really nothing. Okay. Well, that's not an answer. That's not an answer for a desperate sleep deprived mom. Okay. And certainly there's a reason, looking back, there's a reason why he wasn't sleeping. But there wasn't a desire to dive into a root cause. And I found that that's pretty consistent with an autism diagnosis. You have these comorbidities whether it's gut dysbiosis or, a number of things. It could be pandas, it could be Lyme disease. There are lots of comorbidities, constipation, food allergies, intolerances that are simply chalked up to autism. And I think a lot of us in the autism world, that's what we're fighting for, right? We're fighting for not just a blanket statement of my child has autism. While that's important to get services and to get understanding, the more critical piece is let's not ignore the intricacies that are involved oftentimes in an autism diagnosis. And of course, there is no one size fits all approach, and there's no one size fits all diagnoses, right? So as I was beginning to navigate this, I had a child who was chronically constipated. I was giving him the inserts, right? Why am I blanking on that word? Suppositories, infant, like I had to cut it in half, and these are the things where I look back and I'm like, oh, that wasn't right. And, the answer was, oh, he's crying because colic has set in, he's colicky. You can give him Tylenol. So I was giving him bottles and bottles of the infant Tylenol. So, later on when I would go to work for Dr. William Shaw at the Great Plains Laboratory and New Beginnings, hearing his research and his published paper on Tylenol when 2017 or something like that, that's where my mom guilt start. There are so many moments in time where we have this mom guilt. So his story was of he just was an unhappy little guy. And that just continued until we started the unwinding process for him.
Wow. The mom guilt is real. Like it really is. And even because your son is 22, mine is 20. And I still look back and think I should have fought harder to not have a C-section, or I should have, known more about this or the other thing and never should have done X and Y. Even though they're okay and you do better when you know better, I think we took, you and I, when we know better, we do better. Like we know way better now. Like, did we go to the extreme or what?
Well, and if I'm working with a client, I actually was at a conference recently and I had a mom breaking down into tears, and it makes me cry every time too, because, our life is very different, right? My life is so different. These are the days that I prayed for so many nights, and I never take that lightly. And I want to talk a little bit about that and our kids as we go through, if you don't mind. But I still remember those days, and I still remember my fears, my desperation for an answer, all of the emotions of being a mom and wanting to protect your child, and then look back and blame myself for the things that I did. I gave him that Tylenol. I took him to this appointment or that appointment. And what I tell clients, what I told this mom was, we don't make as much forward progress if we're beating ourselves up. And I say that because I spent so much time beating myself up, and it was a hindrance to me moving forward, right? So we have a couple of choices. We have the choice of listening to what we're told in the mainstream about it's just genetics and there's really nothing you can do. I mean, that's what I was when I sat down across that desk of that developmental pediatrician at a major center in Arizona and was told, yes, your son meets the criteria for an autism diagnosis, and it's a genetic condition and there's nothing that you can do, and you need to be prepared for your son living in a home. That's what we were told, right? And so when you are faced with any sort of diagnosis, you have a couple of choices. You can believe what you're told, or you can, put on your boots and start wading into, the situation and determine what is changeable. For us, detox was a huge piece, which is why you and I sort of met and connected over that detox modality. But it was one piece, right? There are so many pieces, there are so many layers, but the important piece is one, well, there's a couple of important pieces. There's no one size fits all approach. And as parents, first and foremost, there are a lot of phonies. There are a lot of people out there who just want your money. You do have to have some discernment, because when I say I was a desperate parent, I probably would have tried just about anything. And now, now you and I talk about it. There's a lot of messaging out there. There are a lot of products that are, bogus or whatever. But at the end of the day, there's no one size fits all approach for any child. And the key is working with a qualified practitioner who's able to start piecing together the puzzle and help you as the parent execute, because there is no shortcut. There's no shortcut. And, whoever your practitioner is, they're not going to come and make the gluten-free, dairy-free, soy-free, dye-free foods for your child. They're not going to get the supplements into them. They're not going to drive them to the therapy appointments. This journey was not for the faint of heart, but it was so much more fulfilling than I could have ever understood. I look back now, and it was so much of head down, march forward, right? Like it was peeling back the layers of an onion. And I don't know, and this is what I tell parents all the time, I'm operating from 17 years down the road. You can't judge yourself by what other people are doing, because my journey and where I am as a human was largely dictated by what my son and my daughter and my husband and I needed, right? So you realize pretty quickly, or I did on this journey, is that this wasn't just a Matthew thing. Like, hello, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. I have mitochondrial issues. I have some of, as I healed him, I also had to take a really hard look at myself and say, it's not just his diet anymore, it's our diet. And how much do so many of my, immediate family have similar biochemical pathways that also need to be supported? He was the canary in the coal mine. So he lit the light that said, yo, you better get some stuff straight real quick, right? So, it's also a very unique journey. And so I think if I had looked at all that was going to be needed, it's like that adage, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. If I had known at the time what I was going to do, it would have seemed too big and too overwhelming. But at the end of the day, little changes over time and consistency add up to huge improvements.
And, you talk about diet and all the different pieces. And I think what a lot of newly diagnosed parents don't understand is you've got to be all in, and what kids eat matters. It can make or break recovery for a child.
Hugely. It still stands as one of my foundational pieces for Matthew's recovery. And, these are the things that I really encourage parents to dive into, because it was something that I could, start to look up prior to even really getting a diagnosis. By his third birthday, I remember making a gluten and dairy-free birthday cake, no dye. It was, and back then, you couldn't go to a grocery store and find gluten-free, dairy-free, cake mix, frostings, pre-made muffins, all these different things. It's amazing now what's out there, but you couldn't back then. And so everything was homemade, and people would say, wow, that's a lot of work. Yeah, it is. But when you have a child who's sleeping better, whose belly isn't as distended, who doesn't have big red circles under their eyes from the dyes and these chemicals, when he's not craving wheat and dairy. He would prefer to drink a sippy cup of milk than to eat food. All he wanted was wheat and dairy. And so those were, now looking back, oh yeah, that's indicative of truly that opiate response, addictive type reaction in his body. So when I, talk to parents about, well, I could never make dietary changes, my child would starve, my son's palate opened up like never before once I got those things out. Yeah, it was like there was like a week period where it was amazing. It was like a totally different child. And then we moved into sort of a 2-week die-off period. And that was not fun. But I had to stick to my guns, and I had to continue on. And it was the most amazing thing I had ever watched. And I had to work with a nutritionist, Julie Matthews, who's now a very, very dear friend after so many years, because it is a lot. But there are so many resources out there about making dietary changes. And I used to joke that I would much rather be in my kitchen making food for a happy toddler than managing meltdown after meltdown after meltdown and no sleep and all of the things, the chronic constipation and all of those things that went along with a poor diet.
So what I tell people all the time is you have to choose your hard. It's hard to have a screaming, non-sleeping, eczema covered, constipated kid, but it's also hard to be in your kitchen. So, and like you, I stood in my kitchen and made gluten-free, dairy-free, chicken nuggets and mac and cheese until we could get him to eat more things. So choose your hard.
Well, and you nailed it. Like, my husband had dealt with chronic eczema from childhood. My daughter, it's so fascinating looking at the biochemical similarities in our family, right? Matthew is much more biochemically similar to me, whereas my daughter is much more biochemically similar to my husband. And as a little baby, she started to get eczema. And that was so my kids are about 2.5 years old. So Matthew was 3, she was about 6 months. And that, I had taken her in. We were still going to a mainstream pediatrician. I took her into the pediatrician, and they wanted to do steroid, cream on her teeny tiny little baby feet. And that's sort of where I started to go, okay, this isn't the answer for me. So we transitioned her even off of dairy at that point. She, and made different food choices. I changed my diet because she was nursing. And voila, the eczema cleared up. So even in children without an autism diagnosis, these same principles, even for just parents who want to raise, happy, healthy kids, these principles apply no matter what.
So what was Matthew's trajectory like? You changed his diet. I would imagine you started doing some organic acids tests and some stool things, like you kind of moved on down that line. What was that trajectory like?
Oh yeah. So we found a doctor he was in Southern California at the time, which I was born and raised in Southern California. We now live in Arizona. At this point, so I, such a full circle moment, right? I was on a Great Plains Laboratory free webinar, and I was listening to this physician talk about nighttime giggling, alternating between giggling and screaming, and how the silly, goofy, giddy, out of it behavior can be indicative of candida overgrowth, and how the bacterial overgrowth can be that high frustration level, low tolerance for frustration. And I'm sitting here and I'm almost like tearing up because I'm hearing a doctor for the first time describe my son and what I was experiencing. I would go into mainstream pediatrician appointments and I would say, he lays in his crib and he's screaming like all night long, or giggling, laughing like maniacally. And, there was never any answer for that. And so to hear a doctor describe so perfectly what I was facing, that's why I was like, okay, I don't care what it takes. I have to go see this doctor. Now, mind you, we were one income household because I had given up my job to stay at home. So went to see him, and he gave me lots of options. Here's the gamut that we can do, right? And it really depends on your budget and your comfort level and things like that. I said, I want to do whatever I can, because I want a complete picture. I don't want to keep chasing symptoms or chasing one thing and miss the broader picture that we're dealing with. And so we did hair, stool, blood. That was traumatic for all involved.
Yes.
Urine. But still, as a parent, and I actually did a webinar for GPL on this, as a parent, the organic acids test, that's such a sleeper test, right? Like, it gives you so much information. The key is working with a practitioner who really understands it. And, I was literally working with one of the best in this realm. And so he taught me, along with, figuring out what was going on with Matthew, because my goal was, well, if I can run all these tests, that's great. It's a snapshot in time, right? What's going on? Do we have heavy metals? We've got dysbiosis. What's going on with his nutrients? Things like that. But then what he did was he taught me how to be a detective and link those behaviors with those markers. So even now, as a 22-year-old, Matthew will say something like, "Oh, I'm getting so frustrated for no reason." Clostridia. Okay, we got to get back on the bio side. And we got, and so again, these are my tools in my toolbox, and that's what I would try and impart on parents, because it's really critical to find amazing physicians and practitioners out there. That's number one. But then two, we have to be the expert in our children, because even though I was led by some amazing people, we're the day-to-days. We're the ones seeing them in, at school and dealing with these things that come up. And we have to be able to have a toolbox that's rich in being able to say, aha, okay, that's why his diet, he's been craving sweets and carbs. And this is why his poop is stinky. And, as an autism mom, we talk a lot about poop and what it looks like and how it smells and, all these things, because these are clues, right? Is he sensitive to phenols, Clostridia, phenol compound, all these different things. And that was sort of that journey for us. Was I created a daily log. I actually share it with clients now, because I say, like, if you're going to maximize these really expensive visits with these physicians and practitioners, you need to come correct. You need to be ready. You need to have your binder, and you need to be able to say, when we started this medication or supplement, 3 days in, we noticed this, because those are the clues your clinician needs to make adjustments to your protocol. And then the side benefit to that is, as a parent, we get to learn that too. And so then those become clues for you to tweak things mid-consult, right? Depending upon what frequency you're consulting with your professional. So
now you would say, after biomedical intervention, lots of therapies, he is essentially without that diagnosis anymore.
Yes, and let's talk a little bit about that. So he graduated from high school. If we go back, there was a lot. There was, diet, supplementation. We did do some prescriptions like methylcobalamin. So we did do methyl B12 shots. We did LDN for a little bit for an immune modulation, because he definitely had autoimmunity tendencies. So we did a lot over the span of, 17 years. So by the time he was hitting kindergarten, I'm still friends with his preschool teacher. So in the Gilbert Public Schools down in, it's a Phoenix suburb, they had an amazing program. Actually, it was another God moment. We ended up in the district that was number 2 in autism related services for the country. The year, that he was moving into an autism specific preschool. So There was an autism specific preschool, very small, low lights, very calm sensory environment. They would do brushing protocol. They would have a beanbag, all the great things, right? Still love that teacher as well. Then there was a neighboring classroom that was the integrated classroom. And this was a bigger classroom. I believe she had 15 students. 4 were typical peer models. So 4 students had no disabilities. They met the goals for speech and language. They could serve as that peer model. Okay. So they would bring the kiddos from the SPICE classroom into the integrative classroom, and it would be just too much for him. And so they'd bring him back out. And, I'd get regular updates. Oh, he was able to spend 30 minutes in the integrative class. Wonderful. Awesome. So I decided to embark on biomedical protocols in the summer. He's home. I could do more at home. And I didn't have the issue with him going to school and it disrupting his learning, right? And so we started biomedical over the summer. He goes back in for the fall, and he goes in with his autism specific classroom. They start coming out. I'm there with my baby in her stroller. I'm waiting for him. The autism classroom starts to come out. No, Matthew, where is my son? He came out with the integrated class. And the integrated teacher comes up to me and goes, what have you been doing? This is like a different child. And I'm still friends with her to this day. And so that was like, okay, he was not in any way, shape, or form able to tolerate all day in the integrated class. Here we are after a summer, you would expect regression. No, he hit the ground running. That goes to show you what yeast overgrowth, bacterial overgrowth, inflammation, autoimmunity, a diet with gluten and dairy. This was all fogging up his system. Before biomed, he wouldn't even respond to his name. I had to get his hearing checked because I honestly thought he had hearing loss, because I could be 18 inches away from him calling his name and he wouldn't even look at me. He was legit in his own little world. So now, by the time he hit kindergarten, he was in a mainstream class, still struggling, still had speech delay, still had occupational therapy, was still fairly delayed in certain areas. Okay. So then we moved to Flagstaff, change our whole lifestyle. He's in now in a Waldorf inspired charter school. So it's body movement learning at the same time as you're moving your body. It was amazing for him. And we just kept, one foot in front of the other. Right. And so by the time he started to hit middle school, I ended up homeschooling him for a period of time. And then when high school time, just before his freshman year, he was due for the testing, the triennial testing through the school district. So I got him tested, and at that point, there was no autism at play. So even in the preschool, before going to kindergarten, he was assessed using the CARS evaluation, childhood autism rating scale. Okay, so when he went into preschool, he was in the severely autistic range. And then after biomedical intervention prior to kindergarten, he was in the not autistic range. Okay, so that was a huge improvement. By the time he got into high school, he had specific learning disability related to math and some things related to that, and still some residual anxiety. But our high school, they were amazing, and they let him start very slowly and get used to it. And so he ended up graduating with his class, going to a full schedule by that second year in high school. He's an Eagle Scout. He's got a job. He's learning to drive. He's got his learner's permit. He's doing so well. And so, these are the things that I still struggle with, because I can see him beat himself up. Just like we talk about mom guilt, I think some of our kids, when they get to this level of improvement, it's like, it's this no man's land that not many people talk about, right? Like, he is such a self-advocate. He is so amazing, but oftentimes he's really hard on himself because of what he sees on social media. And there's still a little bit of that anxiety piece. And so, I have to have that talk with him occasionally, dude, look where you came from, and to be at conferences like MAPS or TACA. He went to TACA with me and was up on stage and answering questions. I have to tell him, like, you have worked so hard and you serve as such an inspiration to families who have nonverbal kiddos, who don't know what they're thinking or are able to communicate yet, right? Like I always like to say yet. But our kids are so hard on themselves, just like we are hard on ourselves about whatever perceived, shortfalls or shortcomings we may have, right? So he's doing amazing. He's doing amazing. He's actually prepping right now. So we converted a space in our house that's this huge space into a studio apartment. So we're really working on independent living skills, right? Proving everybody wrong. And I have no doubt he will be able to live independently. And he's already driving himself to work, which is amazing. He's finishing up. Well, he's not finishing up his AA degree. I think he's actually going to transfer to Northern Arizona University and get his bachelor's. But if he wanted to finish up his AA, he would be very, very close at this point in time. So he's actually prepping for his annual guys white elephant party that he and his group of friends, it's a group of 5 of them, and they're just the best guys. They all met in high school or shortly thereafter, and it's just the best. And so, we're going to be running out, picking up all the food for his party. I don't know about you, but it's even more exhausting being a mother of young adults, like right, helping them live their dreams. It's amazing.
So what do you say when there's an awful lot of nonsense on social media. Like there's so many people I can't be friends with anymore. There's so much I can't read because it just literally sets my hair on fire. But one of the things that really gets me is that faction of people who say, your kid is perfect like they are. Why do you want to change them? Like, what do you say about that?
I'm getting an eye twitch already. So,
Right?
when there was a big whatever controversy, it's rage bait. It's manufactured controversy because there was something that came out and everybody was all up in arms. And it becomes so political and it becomes so like, I hate the person, I hate the messenger, so I can't hear the message. So, I feel like we've done a really a big disservice to many individuals by just grouping all levels of autism and developmental disorders into one category. Because, now my son is an adult and he is on social media. And so he and I did sort of a rebuttal video because, again, it's one thing to hear my opinion, and I'm also one of those weird people. I used it in that diagnostic scale because that's what they used. I don't like the term autistic individual, and I get it. Everybody has their own, the way they feel about it. I feel like that's such an identity, right? And for my son, there were biomedical issues that, because of an autism diagnosis, were being outright ignored, that dramatically, like once you dive into the biochemistry, once you dive into neurotransmitter production, dopamine, serotonin, what is happening in these individuals' brains, because I can watch it in my son. I can watch it. I can watch it when he's on social media too much. I can, all of these different things. That's not my son. That's a piece of his biochemistry.
Right.
That's not who he is. And we can adjust and we can bring in things through diet, through supplementation that honor and support his biochemistry, that allow him to have less anxiety, be more focused, have less brain fog, have less sensory issues. I mean, this was a guy, I couldn't take him to 2 stores in a day because the lights, the sounds, the people's perfumes, like all of the different sensory things were such an overload for him. We literally celebrated the day we could do 2 errands in a row and then 3 errands in a row as we addressed what was being ignored by other physicians, right? These are the things that I'm talking about. If you can advocate for yourself and you can, oh, it's quirky and I have this and I have that, and you meet a diagnostic criteria for autism, there's no judgment. I have no judgment. Everybody's journey is their own. But when you tell people you don't love your child because you're trying to change them, no, absolutely not. I'm trying to hear my child's voice. He had impaired methylation. He couldn't sleep. He didn't produce his own melatonin. He had autoimmunity. He had almost no natural killer cell activity. None of those are going to be fixed by me pouring more love onto my child. I can't love my child more. And if it's like telling a parent with a child with juvenile diabetes, you just don't love them enough. I think it's highly offensive. And, it's one thing if you've received an autism diagnosis and you are a very different biochemical type than my son, and your autism diagnosis results in different things for your life, that's on you. And I don't take anything away from those individuals either. I think everybody deserves to be happy and healthy. And my son wasn't happy nor healthy. And he was being mistreated because of a diagnosis, because of a diagnostic label. And we wouldn't do that in anything else. So I don't get the manufactured outrage. We can coexist. If you have an autism diagnosis and it's not dramatically impeding your ability to communicate, sleep, eat, poop, learn, yes, it is a spectrum, and it's called a spectrum for a reason. But what parents like me are talking about involves underlying biochemistry and underlying mechanisms that deserve to be addressed. If we would have stayed on the trajectory, I don't know if he would be verbal, right? I don't know if he would be verbal. I don't know if he would be able to have his own YouTube channel, go to school on his own in an integrated class. And there's no judgment, right? Again, there's no judgment. What if you never get out of the autism specific classroom? That's okay. If your needs are being met, my son's needs were not being met. And when they were met, he began to speak. He was able to handle sensory input. He was able to poop regularly. All of these things got better. And that didn't have any relationship to the amount of love that he received or didn't receive. So this messaging, I think, part of it is rage baiting. Part of it is maybe people who don't see, right? Even my own family members, I would leave a party, and as soon as we would get into a car, he would let loose. He would hold it together in whatever environment we were in. And as soon as we'd get into the car, he knew, okay, this is my safe space. I can break down. And it would be hours upon hours of screaming, and it would be really hard to settle him. And I would walk him and wear him in that baby sling and just soothe him and comfort him. But his system was just so inflamed over holding it together for that period of time. But nobody saw that. So when people are making these judgments or whatever, and this is what I have said a number of times, if you're speaking on this issue and you haven't supported a family with autism to the level that we're talking about here, I encourage you to do so. Rather than be an armchair quarterback, why don't you volunteer to go pick up groceries for a family who can't take their child to a grocery store because they melt down over all of the sensory input? Why don't you offer to get set up as a HAB or a respite provider and give them an hour of babysitting? Watch a neurotypical sibling, take them to an activity. Like, this debate doesn't help autism families no matter where you are on the spectrum. Like, at some point, we all have to come together and support one another and quit bickering about families like us and what we're doing, and other families that do see it as something to be celebrated, right?
Yeah.
It's a spectrum, and you can live with integrity without tearing another family down. Because at the end of the day, these, if I can speak for my subset of autism families, we already have enough guilt. We already have enough that we've dealt with over the years. Exclusion from society because we have a child who's melting down with the, well, your child just needs a good spanking. Yeah,
Yep.
I'm sure that would do it. Yeah.
Mhm.
And again, it's like if we operated more from a place of grace and how can I help you, and less from judgment, and you are seeing something differently than I do, I think the world would be a much better place, especially for our loved ones. Because Matthew has a huge, rightfully so, opinion on this topic himself.
Yeah. Well, it's so difficult when you work with families all day, every day, and the vast majority of them say, I asked for labs from my pediatrician and they said, no, it's just autism, diarrhea and constipation and not sleeping and eczema and not eating and screaming and tantrums. It's just autism, right? It, it doesn't help anyone. So to the doctors out there who say that to their patients, just admit you don't know what to do. It's okay. Find a referral who you can send to so that these families can get the help that they need.
Amen. And that's the thing, is that there are so many things that can be done. And yes, it can be tricky figuring out the pieces to your child's puzzle, but that is the important piece. And it's important that families seek out practitioners who are not operating from a one size fits all protocol, because there is none. Your child is very unique, and every facet and aspect of your child's behavior and bodily functions and biochemistry, they deserve to be looked at in a unique way, not just with a blanket, here's the protocol that is easiest for me to sell, honestly.
So you took this experience and became a practitioner yourself. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I wanted to help other families. So I did a program that sort of gave me a well-rounded approach in like the health coaching realm. So it's technically a doctorate in traditional naturopathy, but it's very different than a licensed naturopathic physician. I am not a naturopathic physician, and so I really help families bridge the sea between working with a physician who's ordering and interpreting labs, and how do I actually apply this in a home with other children, with a busy schedule, with a fixed budget. I sort of help all of the lifestyle pieces with a big emphasis on detoxification in multiple, ways, whether that's getting toxins out of your food supply, your home, working with something like the Ion Cleanse by AMD, or, something like that. So, I just felt like once you see the amazing capacity to heal that the human body has, there was no way that I couldn't help other families. I joke that I always wanted to shorten another family's journey. It took me so long because back then we didn't have all of the knowledge that we have today. And for people out there is an ever-growing body of scientific research. You can go to PubMed, which, yes, you can get to through Google. You can Google these things and pull up PubMed articles on reduced glutathione in kids with autism, increased toxic exposure and autism-related symptoms. Same thing with ADHD. the role of diet and nutrition in reduction of autistic behaviors, things like that. There are so many research papers out there, and more every day. And so it really is taking things into your hands, figuring out, for me, it was like the white coat syndrome, right? Like I really trusted practitioners, doctors, and I sort of pushed my own intuition to the side as a result. And really, at the end of the day, what I coach clients on is this empowerment of you are the day-to-day person for your child or your children, and you can do this. You can take the information that your qualified medical practitioner is giving you, and you can learn to translate this into a diet that works for your child, a supplement protocol that is easy for you to get in, a lifestyle change in many cases, how you're going to just balance this. Because at the end of the day, we're the experts in our children. We really are. And we utilize the talents. I used to say that my son's doctor was my compass, right? He guided, and I was the one who went on the journey. I was the one cooking the foods and getting the supplements and the medications in some cases into Matthew. And you need that guiding force. You do. But at the end of the day, sometimes we give away our power and our knowledge of our kids. And that's so, that information is so valuable, because it's those little pieces. You tell me, as a clinician, how many times does a parent pull out a little pearl and you go, oh,
that's everything. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Now, all right. I wasn't even going down the pathway of this sudden onset OCD. Oh, yeah. They had just had a viral infection. Okay. All right. Now let's test on this, and let's, use this protocol, whatever it is. But those pieces are so important for parents, and it's harnessing our own power to understand that we do play a vital role in our children's treatment protocol, their recovery journey, whatever that looks like, right? And it doesn't mean you love your child any less to not want them to spend their days screaming and not having language and not pooping and being so uncomfortable and having food reactions, right? Like that's not what we want for our kids.
Well, I think you're amazing, and I appreciate you sharing your wisdom. I mean, there's just nothing like learning from someone who's walked the walk.
Well, right back at you. You are literally one of my favorite people. And, I think I've said many times, autism is one of those journeys where I don't think any of us asked for this, right? But we are asked to grow and to trust God and to follow the trajectory that leads us to something better at the end result. And a piece of that is who we meet along this walk, and having people like you to walk next to. It's been an absolute gift. And every time we're together, it's never enough time. And
Right.
I just love you and respect you so much.
Aw. Well, thanks for sharing your story and Matthew's story. And I just hope, that the people who are watching can see that complex kids can get better, and that there are practitioners out there who get it, who understand. You just have to look for them and not just swallow the answers that you're given in the mainstream that just says, "Oh, just take him home and love him. Oh, it's genetic. There's nothing you can do." So, yeah, I hope people enjoyed it, and I thank you so much for your time and your expertise.
My pleasure. Anytime.
Have a Merry Christmas.
You too.
Okay, bye everybody.
Bye.